My final guest is Dr. Arie Gutman. He has a long history in the pharmaceutical industry, essentially creating the building blocks for modern medicine. Goodman sought to eliminate the difficulty in creating generic versions of branded drugs and is president and CEO of FineTech Pharmaceuticals. In 1990, Dr. Goodman established FineTech Pharmaceuticals, which evolved into an FDA-approved pharmaceutical company, exporting its products to the US, Canada, Europe, and South America. FineTech possesses proprietary technology and confidential expertise in organic synthesis, allowing genetic pharmaceutical manufacturers to launch products in high-barrier markets. And it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Gutman.
Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for that great introduction. Doesn't leave much for me to say. My story is actually very different from what I heard from other people, because firstly, I have nothing to do with computers or anything digital. The only time I use a computer is when I send an email. And secondly, I was never involved with any venture capital funds. And thirdly, all I did wasn't really for the money. It may sound a little kind of unbelievable, but it is actually true. Let me just take a couple of minutes to tell you where we are now and how we got to this point. So FineTech Pharmaceuticals is based in Nesher, which is just outside of Haifa. And 4 years ago, I sold it to Opco Health, which has headquarters about a mile away from here. It's a Miami-based company headed by the legendary billionaire entrepreneur, Dr. Philip Frost. And Dr. Frost, after the sale 4 years ago, asked me to stay on with FineTech as CEO, and also asked me to take a role at Opco, which I was glad to do, and I'm still doing it now. If you didn't hear about Opco, which now owns FineTech, it is a great, innovative biopharmaceutical company traded on the New York Stock Exchange. And if you are planning to invest in this field, check out OPK. That's the ticker on the New York Stock Exchange. So this wasn't my first deal. In fact, this was my third exit. And the first one was in 2001, and the second one was in 2007. But I think it is interesting to tell the story of why and how I started FineTech, because as I said, it's pretty different from others. And this is a story of serendipity, which is a pleasant surprise through a totally unexpected event. And this happened in 1990, with the beginning of the massive immigration from the Soviet Union, or the former Soviet Union, soon to become. Just to give you an idea, Israel in 1990 was a nation of about 4 million people, and within 3 years it absorbed 1 million immigrants from the Soviet Union. So this would be equivalent to the United States absorbing within 3 years 80 or 90 million immigrants. So this was a huge event, and I think it had a big role, a big impact on all the high-tech stories that you have been hearing about. And I myself am an immigrant from the Soviet Union, as my accent probably gives away. But I actually came in 1973, when it was still pretty much the Soviet Union under Leonid Brezhnev, and it wasn't easy to leave at the time, but we managed to escape somehow. And I arrived in Israel as a young 19-year-old. Within 2 months, found myself in the middle of the Yom Kippur War, worked on a kibbutz, served in the army, not in the 8200 unit or some other fancy military intelligence, because with my security clearance of an immigrant from almost an enemy country, the Soviet Union, they wouldn't let me go too far. So I did it actually the traditional way, walking through the Sinai desert, carrying about 60 to 80 pounds of weight on my back. And then eventually I studied and became a professor at the Technion. So in 1990, I was a professor at the chemistry department, professor of organic chemistry. Didn't know anything about business. Had dreams of getting a Nobel Prize. And then every evening on the news, they were talking about this impending huge wave of immigration, and where are people to go to find, where are people going to find employment for all these hundreds of thousands of people. And then I had an idea that basically, as a professor at the Technion, maybe I can get some funding from somebody and employ some of the chemists, Russian chemists who were coming. And an old friend of mine, who himself was an immigrant back during the Holocaust, and did very well for himself, he gave $140,000 to set up FineTech. This was the first FineTech. And when I said you should get at least 50% of the stock of the company, he said, no, that's okay. You know, you just do good work. I don't need the shares. Because nobody really believed that it will come to anything. And I started the first company together with the Technion as a 50-50 partnership with this $140,000 as the capital, and started hiring really brilliant chemists from the Soviet Union, and the company started its life. And in the second year, it was already profitable. Now, when I say profitable, it was profitable on sales of about 100,000. You can just understand how poor everything was, that with 100,000 revenue, you can make a profit. Of course, I didn't take a salary, and the others got the minimum wage. And the company grew, and basically, initially, was doing contract research for other companies because we had good researchers, good science, and gained a reputation. And let me tell you the story about the first exit. So one of our customers was a large publicly traded company in New Jersey. And I visited them several times. And on my last visit in 2000, I got to talk not only to the R&D person, but also to the CEO of the company. Somehow he wanted to see me. And I had a long chat with him. And then half an hour later, he found me while I was still in the company and said, Arie, our chairman and the main shareholder, Mr. Sam Heyman, would like to invite you for dinner. So I thought, wow. And Sam Heyman, unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but he was a very serious New York billionaire who owned this company and a number of other businesses. So the dinner was at the fancy Pierre Hotel in New York, and I was pretty hungry by then because the last time I ate was a sandwich at about 12 o'clock, and this was 7:30. So I come to this dinner anticipating a really good meal because the restaurant was magnificent. And I ordered my favorite artichoke and mushroom soup. and New York strip steak with some nice vegetables. And we had a little small talk, and then they brought the soup. And then Sam Heyman tells me, well, Arie, tell me about yourself. Just as I took the spoon in my hand. So here goes down my spoon, and I talk while they're eating. And just as I was kind of finishing to say what I wanted to say, the waiter showed up and asked, are you done with the soup, sir? And I said, yes, I am, thank you. It was very good. And then there is again some small talk, and he chats a little bit, and the CEO, who was also present. And then they bring my steak. And then Sam tells me, well, Arie, why don't you tell me about the company now? So I put down my knife and fork and start telling them about the company. And it seemed like he was really interested in the story. And by the time I stopped, the waiter, of course, was there to ask if I'm done with the steak, and I said it was great. I didn't order dessert because I didn't see any point in it. But besides the fact that I was starving at the end of this dinner, the meeting went quite well. And I actually said that, you know, the company is going to make in 2001, it's going to have sales of 6 million and an EBITDA of at least 3.5 million. And he said, well, would you consider selling it? And since the only shareholders was a Technion and myself, and the Technion was happy to get any amount of money, it really didn't know much about the company, and I made all the decisions. We discussed the price. And at the end of the meeting, when I named the price, he didn't bat an eyelid and put his hand around my... we are going to start talking about it. Like, it sounds good. And what I didn't realize at the time is that this was the beginning of due diligence, where they really put me through the ringer. The interesting thing is I refused to give a 5-year projection. I said, I just don't know how to make 5-year projections. So they said, well, at least give us, you know, 6 or 7 months projection, months by months. And I actually gave them projections for January, February, March, whatever. And then the due diligence started, and I saw that they kept stalling and stalling. And then at the end of January or early February, I will get an email. Could you please send us the actual results for January? And the actual results were better than my projection. Then could you send us the actual results for February? And again, it was better than my projection. And by May, I was in a position to tell them, listen, you know, as you see, the company is doing great. I'm still prepared to do the deal with you at the price that we agreed, but if we are not going to close it within the next 2 weeks, we will have to kind of say goodbye to you. And the deal closed within 2 weeks. So I was asked to say what my lessons from the exits are. So 2 lessons. First of all, don't go hungry to an important meeting. And secondly, be careful with projections, because for those who didn't experience it, when you think that you have a deal, this is just the beginning of negotiating. So this was my first exit. The second, and especially the third, were a lot more straightforward. With Dr. Frost, I actually had a nice lunch where I was able to eat everything that I wanted. And I am very happy to be associated with OPCO, which is a great company. And thank you very much for your attention. And I was really proud to hear that there are so many great things coming out of Israel. Thank you.